Welcome back to Daily Inbox Tips. My guest today, a guy I met through we met through X or LinkedIn. I can't remember now.
Yeah,
It's X.
X. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I still call it Twitter. So
Twitter. Yeah, I know. It's the naming convention there. I get rebranding and all that stuff, but it's one of those things. Like when I type into ChatGPT, I'm like, will it understand X or what they think it's a variable? Like does
yeah,
it
right,
understand
right. I get it.
actually what's happening? So do a quick introduction and then we'll hop into the show.
Yeah, thanks so much. So my name is Dave Crysler. I founded a boutique consultancy focused around operations just over 5 years ago, and that's after a long-standing corporate history and growing up in entrepreneurial family. So kind of made my way back to the entrepreneurial roots. But yeah, we work with mostly small and medium-sized manufacturing and distribution businesses, helping them to define and roll out operational excellence activities.
Yeah. Okay. So when you say small, medium, those are terms that get thrown a lot, but kind of
I know.
define, yeah, define what that really is, and when you say it.
Yeah, yeah. For us, that's somewhere between 5 and 50 million top line revenue.
Mhm.
That's typically in the some people call that lower mid market,
Yeah.
right? Like
Correct.
all of these terms are interchangeable, but for me, that's it's 5 to 50 million is kind of generally our sweet spot. We've worked with companies that are smaller. We've worked with companies that are quite a bit larger, but
Hmm.
that's the target today.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you get on Twitter, and SMB gets thrown out a lot, and it's mostly S's, which is I'm an S, so I don't really care. I
Yeah.
don't really,
Yep.
but it's like mostly it's below that 5 million mark. Actually, is what
Oh
most
yeah.
people are talking about, not the $50 billion companies. And so that's why I always ask, like, what do you really mean? Because we all kind of say SMB or SME or whatever it is we're talking about, and it's like, well, okay, well, are we talking about the M's or just the S's, or like what are we actually defining here? So
I
so
get it.
so 5 to 50 million is a good range. Let's start there. What is when we talk about manufacturing?
Yeah.
Is it any kind of manufacturing? Span the gamut of all types. What all industries?
Yeah, I mean, sure, it could be all manufacturing. Most of the work that we do is within custom manufacturing environments.
Okay.
So the majority of what we're doing is looking for opportunities to like increase throughput, increase productivity. We also do some work around like product quality. So that
Hmm.
would certainly apply in like a manufacturer that's more of like a stock product, if you
Hmm.
will. So like the other day, I was talking to somebody that they actually owned a pickle factory,
Oh wow.
right? So like something like that. It's kind of stock product because everything is made to be inventoried, right, and
Hmm.
sell through that way. Versus like a custom manufacturer where every widget. Think of an automobile
Hmm.
manufacturer, right? Like you can get a Honda with all kinds of different color options, all kinds of interior trims. So that would be more of a custom manufacturer example.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems that manufacturing is probably, is a lot of work I do is automation, AI stuff, and not really in the manufacturing space. And it's weird because manufacturing is kind of maybe leading the charge because they have to automate, they have to improve processes, and so it feels like the broader business community could probably learn just kind of how their mindset works. Not everything they do is applicable, of course, but just the mentality of like we need to improve efficiency because our margins are so dependent on it. Is that kind of a right way to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think, generally speaking, the market kind of talks about a lot of the AI initiatives and all of the cool tech that's out there. I think the reality for most, folks in manufacturing is, they're kind of struggling to figure out those specific use cases.
Hmm.
And that's broad too, right?
Hmm.
Like even from the perspective of markets outside of manufacturing, it's the connecting the dots between what's my real problem here
Hmm.
and what's the likelihood of a solution. And sure, that could be AI, that could be something from an automation perspective. But a lot of times it really comes down to just simple process
Yep.
improvement, process, effectiveness, and kind of putting, the right pieces in the right order.
Hmm.
And then obviously down the road, taking a look at, okay, great. Now that we've got that and we're, kind of firing on all cylinders, what can we automate? What can we look at? leveraging from an analytics perspective or a predictive analytics perspective
Mm-hmm.
from a AI ML standpoint. So there's some really cool stuff happening. But we're also working on some kind of what I would call like rudimentary things, right?
Yeah.
That I don't think will ever change,
No.
honestly.
Well, and I guess what you're getting, what I'm getting at, sounds like maybe what you're getting at, which is that it seems to me, looking at manufacturing, they're always looking to figure out how to improve. They need to get stuff, uh, pickled fast, pickled jarred faster or whatever, shipped faster. They need to do that stuff, and so they're constantly thinking that way. Whereas your normal business is like, okay, well, you know, we missed a phone call. Who cares? We got to
Yeah.
invoice this late. Who cares? And for them, those are things that they're constantly trying to figure out. So, to your point about automation and AI, I think that one of the drums I've been trying to beat is that a lot of people get. It's like Cheesecake Factory. I don't know if y'all have one where you're at, but you go in there, they've got all kinds of stuff. They got a bunch of
Yeah.
cheesecakes, but they got all kinds of stuff on the menu. It's like you say automation or AI, it's like it doesn't mean really anything. It just means whatever you think it means,
Yeah.
not this. And I just tweeted this out earlier that if we remember the if this then that company, I guess they're still around. But that's really what so many people need. And so like an advanced automation or advanced, even AI, if you want to say that term, most companies don't need it because they're not there yet, right? So
Yeah.
if you come in and try to revamp everything, it's just going to show all kind of red flags. So my advice usually is start small, fix these things, and then once you kind of feel that relief, then go, okay, now what else should we fix? Is that kind of how you think about it as well?
Yeah, you have to because again, like if you want to think of it, from the perspective of just like all the SaaS tools that are
Mm,
available today,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And that's just an iteration of legacy tools,
mm-hmm,
right? Like all this stuff started on prem and then moved to the cloud, and then people started to figure out the subscription model, and
mm-hmm.
and then coding became easier and even easier today with the tools and technology out there, right? So it's all just a genesis of that. But to your point, like if we start the conversation at like kind of the top of that chain, right, or we start with the tool selection before we understand like what's the process flow, how are people integrated into this, what's the real problem we're
Mm-hmm.
solving for, we just get ourselves into trouble, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll give you a great example. I'm working with a company that went down the path of basically creating their own ERP environment. And it's the typical adage of like, hey, we're special, we're custom, we do different things.
Right.
And while all of that is true in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
what they don't do and what their core competency is not, right, is software
Right.
development. So it's very much like that kind of triage and band-aid approach, and what you're left with is something that isn't quite functioning the way you envisioned
Mm-hmm.
because you don't develop software, so you don't have a real roadmap for it. You don't understand the data integrity and kind of
Mm-hmm.
governance behind building a tool, right? And it's the same conversation. Like I've got another client that we worked with that was, take a really simple example, implementing HubSpot. And this isn't to pick on HubSpot because I could simply, replace that with,
Right. Go
go
high
high
level.
level,
Yep.
with Pipedrive. Like it doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
The point is that they started with the tool thinking that that was going to solve the problem. And inevitably it didn't, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it had nothing to do with the function of the tool.
Yep.
What it had everything to do with was the understanding of the process
Mm-hmm.
and what the underlying problem that they were seeing the symptoms of
Mm-hmm.
were, right? So that for me is where all of this starts. And then you can start to spider web again to your point of, what's the best solution? What's going to give us, in terms of likelihood, what's going to give us the best bang for our buck? What's going to move the needle for us, kind of given all these factors, given time, given
Mm-hmm.
resource, given, kind of experience implementing, change,
Mm-hmm.
cost, right? Like all of these different elements. So that's, where the conversation should start.
Yep.
But oftentimes it doesn't.
Yeah, and I see this. If you take HubSpot, and again, just to use a name, I will see people talk online about, well, I need a CRM to do this, or I need my CRM to do that, and The reality is, okay, maybe their CRM actually kind of does it already, or they could quickly just bolt on a small tool to get them to do what they need to do. But
Yes.
if they switch CRMs, you got to learn that whole new ecosystem to figure out exactly how it's going to work. And HubSpot is pretty comprehensive. Like it can do a lot. And so
Oh yeah.
if you're trying to figure out HubSpot, good luck because it's going to take you a long time if you're not familiar with it. So if you got Pipedrive or Close or whatever,
Yeah.
it might just be easier to bolt on something or to make sure the tool can't do it, but bolt on something that specializes in that, connect it with Zapier or whatever, or Make.com or whatever, and then just have that system run. And that's kind of was my point earlier, which is just start with something small, and then if you go, you
Yeah.
know what, we really like this connection, but we want something that does it all together. Then you go, okay, maybe now it's time to go to HubSpot or something more powerful or whatever. But people kind of jump from maybe Close or Pipedrive to HubSpot. It's like, well, now you've just created a new problem because you don't know HubSpot.
Yeah.
And you're gonna spend a bunch of money on that. And so it's this iterative step of like fix this, fix this, fix this, and it kind of gets viewed as lost money. Like I don't want to lose money by just taking step 1 to 2 because ultimately it must be step 4. It's like, well, you might never get to step 4, and maybe you don't need step 4. You don't
Yeah.
know until you try it out, and so you can make more money at better margins just by doing this for now, and then make that decision. And so it's one of those weird conversations where people seem to think that, well, I'm going to get here, and therefore I need that. It's like, well, maybe, but if you don't,
Yeah.
you could just do this, and that would work most of the time.
Yeah, I think the big challenge for people is like, kind of a different way to say the same thing that we're talking about is that, most everybody sees, a problem through their lens of experience, right? So if you like are in software sales, right, you're going to see that particular problem as like, oh, our solution can do XYZ. That's
Right.
what I'm hearing. I'm hearing you want to do XYZ. We can do that, right? What gets missed in that oftentimes is like, again, to your point, the kind of bigger picture of things. And if our experience is limited, that scenario gets compounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the person looking for the solution is thinking about it from a narrow scope, like what's my touch point in this, maybe not bringing in another set of stakeholders or across
Mm-hmm.
the organization as we start to get into bigger orgs talking about these different change initiatives. And so for me, like that's what ends up compounding a lot of these problems is that we go down a path because we were led to believe that this thing would do the XYZ, only to find out like we also need it to do the ABC. And it's like, oh well, you didn't tell us that. Like
Right.
we could build that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
if we need to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I saw this great post too about like specific to tools and again like the ability to roll out these features and it kind of talks to your point about maybe we need to find a bolt on to handle this one specific piece of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge is that with a lot of these tools are looking to capture more market share. So as that conversation or problem set arises, it's like, oh, you need to be able to schedule appointments. Perfect. We'll build a scheduler right
Right.
into our tool, and
Right.
it's like, but does that function the way that you need it to from
Right.
your process perspective
Mm-hmm.
and what your customers or clients are requesting,
Mm-hmm.
or are you going to be having to customize that even further with another set of tools, whether that's through, like to your point, automation, like, Zapier or
Yeah.
Make, or whether that's, that plus again, another calendar scheduling
Right.
tool. Right. So yeah, it's kind of an endless maze, which is what makes this stuff so difficult.
It makes it fun and difficult, right?
Sure. Oh yeah, I love it. Like, yeah,
Because
I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong.
yeah.
Like I love that's why I do this
Right.
stuff because
Right.
I absolutely love the chaos of it and kind of unpacking like what's the real root cause and how can we prioritize these initiatives to say like here's what's actually going to make some movement on
Mm-hmm.
this so we can again, to your point, kind of start this cycle of improvement because, it very much is never ending. There's always something changing from a resource perspective, from a, customer or client perspective, from an internal operations perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's never set it and forget it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things I've seen is companies that will build out stuff for the management, not for the people that use it. so that they can get their
Oh
reports.
yeah.
And so it's like the system works great for the managers, but the
Yeah.
sales guy who's got to use it, it's a 20-hour time suck. And it's like, well, if we could just reverse the thinking here, probably get you the same report that you want. It just looks a little bit different, and your salespeople can be more productive. And so these big, powerful tools can also be skewed in the favor of those who have the power, which I get that they're the decision makers, cool, but they forget that, man, I'm putting so much more work on my employees by not allowing them to go do their job. They had to fill out these reports and all this stuff, and so
Yep.
it's there's a weird, we're coming in a weird age where um, back at my previous life, we used to do a lot of AutoCAD work, and so we looked at AutoCAD and we got it later on, but we used a service called Carlson because AutoCAD we only used like 10% I think or
Yeah.
20% of what it actually did, but Carlson was made more for what we did, and then occasionally we'd need AutoCAD some functionality, so we had a few licenses like that if I try to remember how to parse it out, but that was the basic thing, and so Carlson was better for us because it was way stripped down. It produced the same end result. The clients didn't care. The drafters loved it better. AutoCAD sounded cool and fancy, like, oh yeah, we've got all these CAD subscriptions. But really, it's just more clogged up with all kinds of stuff it could do that people could spend hours just trying to figure out is it helpful. And most of that stuff wasn't helpful. And so we're in this weird era, it seems, where we're coming out of almost these big bloated technologies on one side, and then on the other side you have these very kind of laser like Calendly or Cal.com or whatever that they're going to schedule your meetings. Okay, that's what they do, and it's like, well, do you need a HubSpot scheduling tool, or do you need Calendly or Cal.com or whatever it might be? Do you need that? And how do you do that? And but what I've seen is that people kind of just assume they can either take A or B or connect A and B, and they kind of miss what you're touching on, which is it's the process of which you're using this. The system really impacts it because you can do either way. There's maybe a more efficient way to do it, but either way can get you the solutions. And
Yeah.
if it's a money thing, you can probably learn how to do the tools you have better to make more money. Like and so it's why do you think that is that people kind of get lost in that trap?
I think because technology is so accessible these days, and we're kind of led to believe that it's a tool problem, right? I'll say it a totally different way, taking technology out of the mix. With the work that I do, we come across a lot of folks that have kind of trained or learned specific methodologies, right? So like Lean Six Sigma, or could be even something more simplified than that, or like just general continuous improvement. It could be something like E-Myth or traction,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Like these kind of concepts, and methodologies. And again, when you look at any one of those, there's a lot of tools that fall underneath that. And what I'll hear oftentimes are going to a business that they're working on some sort of change initiative, and they've picked a tool that the tool is meaningful, it works, but it works for a very narrow focus of something that we're trying to do. So you're trying to take this very broad brush and paint details, and it's like it's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, it's like the other day I used the analogy of like, can you hammer a nail with a screwdriver? Absolutely. Is it going to take you for freaking ever to do it? 100%,
Yep.
like,
Yep.
so it's that same thought process. And when the technology is so readily available and everybody is saying like, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, it seems like the simple fix, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, you're telling me all I have to do is like pay this minimum subscription fee and like just roll this thing out and it'll solve all my problems. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
On to the next fire.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like, what do you hear from a change management perspective? You got salespeople or you've
Mm-hmm.
got ops people that are like, this thing sucks, this doesn't do what we need it to do.
Right.
Like, who decided on this? It's
Right.
like, oh well, I did because it fit the budget and they said it could do what we needed it to do. And it's like, great, still have the same problems,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's the root of it, is that it's just so readily accessible and it's kind of slammed into our face like, Go anywhere online and you will see some article about generative AI taking all of our jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody's going to have anything to do. And it's like, meanwhile, real, like, sizable businesses are struggling because they've not updated their org chart
Yeah.
in 36 months.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I love all of that stuff, okay, but there's a lot of fundamental things that have to happen to have a successful and sustainable business,
Mm-hmm.
in the long term, right?
Yeah.
It's the fundamentals.
Yeah. And do you see in your industry a lack of SOPs?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
It's one of those things.
Like,
It's wild, isn't it? Because I get it. Me, solopreneur, don't need SOPs. I know
yeah,
what everybody
yeah.
is.
I'm
If
gonna
I
have to
die,
skip talking to myself about,
yes,
not following my onboarding process, right?
right. If I die, the company goes away. It's pretty
Yeah,
simple. Okay.
yeah,
But if you've got a $35 million manufacturing company, and when I was doing a lot more M&A stuff, I would see this. It's like, you go to sell, it's like, well, who does what exactly? And they're
yeah.
actually doing the same thing. They're not really doing anything unique. Well, maybe they are doing some unique stuff, but 50% of what they do is actually the same. And because they haven't taken the time to do these SOPs, and then that trickles into KPIs, which I think a lot of people have these, big long list of KPIs, and it's like those things, most of those you don't even need, but
Yep,
you think you need them because you don't have the SOPs to show you what everybody's doing, and
yep.
so it's like if you just merge those two things, you would need like 50%, 75% less KPIs, and then you have SOPs. And so hiring, onboarding, all that stuff becomes easier. Are you hitting the KPIs becomes much easier. So do you see that in the manufacturing space as well?
I see it everywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, it's incredible, the kind of gap that exists. And, there's kind of multiple buckets of it, right? Like, you have some companies that obviously have SOPs, but, they live in the proverbial binder under the desk that
Mm-hmm.
nobody ever,
Mm-hmm.
dusts off and references.
Mm-hmm.
You've got companies that, have them that are accessible but haven't been updated in, God knows how long.
Right.
Right. And then you've got the companies that, just kind of said, like, hey, we've got a lot of, longevity here. We kind of all grew up here. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. And then,
Mm-hmm.
to your point, what ends up happening in most of those organizations is, an overload of KPIs and metrics. We're, measuring all kinds of stuff, but, it's like, this really great connection of mine, Max Krug has this great saying about, like, we have, all kinds of, all kinds of data, but, like, no data I can see, right? Like,
Right.
we've got a sea of data, but no data I can see. And the whole point is, like, what's meaningful about it? How is this actionable?
Right.
Like, specific to the KPIs, like, I encourage people, it's like, KPIs are telling the news, like, what kind of leading indicators do we have? Like, how do we
Mm-hmm.
predict the future?
Mm-hmm.
That's the stuff that's way more
Mm-hmm.
critical,
Mm-hmm.
like, if we're talking about, let's say, customer experience,
Mm-hmm.
and, we're looking to be able to predict revenue for the month, and ultimately profitability. Well, don't you think it'd be meaningful to understand, like, how many calls or emails or
Right.
how much inbound activity, how many estimates, how many, like,
Right.
what that ultimately translates into in
Mm-hmm.
terms of number of orders?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that to me is way more important than knowing, like, what we did revenue last month. Like, sure, that's important, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
but it's all after the fact. Like, I'm already, 2 weeks into the next month by the
Right.
time I see that.
Right.
So, like, versus, oh my gosh, these last 2 weeks, like, we normally take 100 phone calls a day. We've only been averaging 50. Like,
Yes.
what's going on?
Right.
Like,
Right.
do we have a problem with the phone lines?
Right.
Right. Like,
Right.
again, it's all of these different little factors. And, just to bring it back to the SOP point, right? Like, a lot of that is driven by there. So, the opportunity to kind of create, like, these central knowledge bases,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of with tools like Notion or
Yeah.
Confluence or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? Like, yeah, there's such a opportunity for companies to tap into that, and to leverage that knowledge, because, at some point it's going to go away, right? People are going to cycle through. People are going to retire.
Yep.
Your business is going to grow. You're going to need to hire more people, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
all these different events,
Yeah.
that can happen.
What I've come across is people seem to get excited about, automation, AI, whatever you want to call it. That's marketing and sales, and I get that it's going to bring in more money and stuff like that. But The SOP and KPI stuff's like, yeah. It's like, well, guys, you might can save, I don't know, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40% right
Right.
now, depending on what you're doing. I don't, it's hard to say because, I don't know how sophisticated you are, but you'd be stunned. I mean, one of the groups we talked to the other day, 30% of their office time is used by something that a simple automation can fix for them. 30%. And it's like, if that's them saying that, not me. So if that's
Sure.
true, if that number's true, this is, it's a small size company in the sense of SMB, so it's below the probably 5 million range or right around there. But so they have a handful of office employees, but they got 50 or 70 technicians. And it's like that 30%. They got to recruit, they got to hire, they got to do all this other stuff. It can do all. You could free up 30% of your core staff's time to do that work. And
Yeah.
so it's like those are the things that we do see. That it's like, man, they have a process in place. They can probably refine it. That's actually something that can improve your margins overnight. That's overnight. My advice to them was, implement the system and make sure it works for what you want, and then switch to it if it does. But so you may double the work for a couple of weeks, but once you're comfortable with how it works, cool. Go to that, and then now you've saved 30% of your time.
Yeah.
Like that's amazing, and I just see stuff like that. So okay, I get it. The marketing, the leads, the nurturing, that's pretty easy to do. To set that up to follow up, but this other stuff, there's so much money out there that's just being wasted. It feels
Yeah.
like because companies are, it is in their mind they don't think about it making more. They sold $1 million last month. They want to sell 1.5 this month. It's like, well, okay, I get that. I'm with you. But if you made 100,000 last month, what if you made 150 this month or
Right.
200,000 this month? Just off of
Yeah.
these things. So how do you have that conversation with clients?
Yeah, I mean, always starts with, kind of their initial assessment of the problem, but we're always looking for those opportunities, again, to your point, to say like, what's going to move the needle here, right? Like what is, I use like a really simple prioritization matrix when we kind of get to the point of saying like, here's some opportunities for us. And it's all based on that, right? Like what kind of, speed,
Right.
cost, ease of implementation, and return on investment or, anticipated return, right? Because again, yeah, like it's easy to go after the revenue stuff, and there's a lot of opportunity out there. You can't have a business without it, right? You can't save your way to growing. I get all of those things, but what could we do if we're able to increase profitability, if we're able to increase cash turns for a business, right? Like what could they do with that freed up capital that, they could redeploy? Like one of my favorite, like recent projects we did, we worked with a company to basically 2x their throughput, right? All existing resources. We didn't do anything from a technology perspective. This was literally just how we were releasing and controlling the flow of work. Okay, that's all that we did. Nothing fancy, right? But by doing that, okay, now we've not only kind of created a roadmap for when the business grows, how we can achieve that, how we could go back to market and say like we can turn custom work 3 times faster than our closest competitor, right? Like so what the other part of that is like a lot of companies would look at it and say like, oh, we need to deploy more labor to do this, we need to invest in additional automated equipment
Right.
to do this, right? Those are certainly options, okay, but we did it with all the existing resources. So it's like, shouldn't we start there
Yeah.
before we go out, but it's that kind of thing, right? So it's providing examples for people and letting them think through, like in your scenario from a front office perspective. And there's a tremendous amount of opportunity both in manufacturing, service-based businesses, all kinds of it's kind of back to the traditional like lean manufacturing thought process, right? The 8 ways. How do we eliminate that downtime, those touch points, the waiting? If we can look at opportunities through that lens, typically you're going to see an outsized return, before we then, look at all of these other,
Yep.
abilities, right?
Yep.
So, in your scenario saying like, okay, well, if we can take a look at this particular order flow and, we could maybe automate a piece of it with, a make integration, let's
Yep.
say, or an automation,
Sure.
that's a pretty low level in terms of, like, uh, im- uh, um, uh, interruption or disruption to the
Yep.
business. Sure, you got to build it. Sure, you got to test it. Sure, you got to, do all the stuff, right? But like that compared to, I've been thinking about creating a brand new front end system that's going to
Yeah.
handle all of our customer service and all of our
Mm-hmm.
order entry and all of our, it's like it's just two totally different conversations. So why wouldn't we start with the, again, the crawl, walk, run
Yep.
versus, let's see how far we can sprint, before we pass out. Like,
Or
you
if
know?
if you free up, if the numbers are right and 30% of the time is on this, and you free that up, that might be all you want. You might go, okay, because it's simple. It's a templated email that they get. They put it into a Google sheet, and then what they need to know is when that technician is going to be free 2 weeks. So if his job's 3 months, so 2 weeks before his time's up, he's gonna be free, so they can put him on a new job. It's like, well, yeah, that's actually not that. That's pretty. It's pretty doable. Like, you
Yeah.
can you can work that out pretty. And then so when they get email 3 months or 2.5 months down the road, they say, hey, need a technician, and it tells them, well, here's your available ones from 2 weeks. Ryan Ray, Dave Crysler,
Yep.
here they are. That's not that sophisticated, in the sense of sophisticated in the sense of some of this more advanced stuff you can do, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
pretty doable. That's pretty easy. And it's like, yeah, that's a great way to go in there and just go, okay, hey, here's just a few tweaks you can make. I mean, it goes from email to Google Sheet to, you can put Notion or wherever you want on the back end, but it's pretty easy to do. In the sense of it could be done. It's not like, hey, we gotta start manufacturing pickle jars.
Yeah.
What do we need? But I become, the more I've talked to people about stuff like this, I become, it's one of those things like, if I'm talking to a roofer, I don't know how to put a roof on a house. That's not my thing. Okay, so I don't talk. I don't get that. For them, putting shingles on a house is pretty simple, pretty basic. And
Yep.
so we talk about automation and stuff. There's a thing that it's hard to convey. It's like, yeah, that sounds pretty complicated. I get it. It's not though. That's not what you mentioned. Building this front end system. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
complicated because there's a lot of moving parts and it's got to connect all this stuff. That's pretty complicated. But most of the time, just these simple workflows is. I almost hate automation and AI saying that, because simple workflows is really all you're providing.
Well, yeah, I totally agree. But like the, kind of my go-to statement for any of this stuff, right? It's simple, not easy. There's a difference
Yes,
between
that's right.
those two
That's
things,
right.
right? Because, again, I could kind of call on a bunch of different examples to say like the work that we're doing, from a technical perspective is very simple.
Mm-hmm.
What makes it not easy at all is the change management element of that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the people and process, right? It's doing the interviews, it's unpacking and understanding like what are these specific touch points? What are the requirements within that? How, variable are
Right.
those things within those touch points, right? And kind of contextualizing all of that into a sensible output
Mm-hmm.
that says like, well, we could take this, this, and this, and we could connect them
Yep.
using this,
Yep.
and here would be the output of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the part that becomes very challenging. And again, like if there's a really kind of hungry and ambitious entrepreneur out there, and whether they're a solopreneur or they're in that 0 to 5 million space, like, can you learn this stuff? Sure,
Mm-hmm.
100%. Are you probably spending more time like automating and building sequences and doing all these different things
Mm-hmm.
than just getting out there and like selling the thing that you're doing to get you from the 0 to 500 to 5 million?
Right.
Yeah, probably, right? Like probably. Because we just get enamored by it. It's like, but I could do this, I could do this, I
Right.
could do this. It's like, well, great, like, but if that's not helping you legitimately grow your business, and that's not measurable,
Hmm.
you're just kind of, it's the busy versus productive, right? Like
Yeah.
you're certainly busy, but you're definitely not being productive.
And I think you're right there. Simple, but not easy, because it's simple to say, yeah, we can do all this stuff because it can be done. But to your point, there's something that they're doing that's going to have a flag somewhere. It's going to kick
Yeah.
something out. You're like, oh, I got to tweak this. And so there's iterations that you got to go through to get
Yep.
all that smooth out. So simple, but not easy is a great reminder for people. Okay, I do have a question about, you mentioned generative AI and stuff like that. How big do you hear a lot of fear about the robots and all that stuff? It's that I see this stuff on Twitter, and Twitter's not real life, so I get it. But but Nick, is there a real fear in the industry that the robots will come, or is there excitement? Like, what's the vibe you get?
Yeah, like I think generally speaking, people are certainly interested,
Mm,
intrigued, excited. I think the reality of it is that so there's a big show that'll be coming up in May in Detroit. I'm based out of Detroit,
mm,
so it travels around this year. It's in Detroit. It's called Automate,
mm,
and you will see some of the coolest automation, robots,
mm,
AI kind of like driven things for manufacturing, supply chain, distribution. And it's kind of the place to get the pulse on what's happening like in real time. And sure, there's lots of people that kind of show their wares, so to speak.
yeah.
And, so I didn't go last year, I was in Chicago, but 2 years ago it was here. And, they had like this like AI robot dog, that was like
Yeah.
walking the show,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
just cool stuff
Yeah.
like that. You see this stuff in real life. And but I share all of that to say, like, the reality is there is kind of, I don't want to say always been, right,
Mm,
because it's certainly iterative,
yeah.
but in the manufacturing and distribution spaces, there is kind of to your earlier point, there's always been this push towards like efficiency, effectiveness,
Mm,
automation,
mm,
and like Amazon is rolling out. This was a couple of months ago I saw, but they're rolling out like some small scale testing with
mm,
like
yep.
actual picking,
Yep.
like droids, if you will.
Yep.
I've seen those at the show. Like it is incredible.
Yeah.
And the thing that most of the people I'm interfacing with and talking to, it's like, sure, we get all of that, and that may solve for some issues like in terms of the labor pool and
Mm,
especially on that lower end, like entry level stuff.
mm,
But what is that going to do? It's going to
yeah.
create opportunity for more skilled folks
Right.
because guess what? That stuff breaks just like the rest of the stuff that
Yep.
manufactures everything that you own.
Mm,
Okay. So we need more technicians. We need more people that
yep.
are going for programming and like computer sciences. We need more engineers to be able to. So it's like, no, it's not coming, for like, no, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not coming for us, okay? Like, will there be some offset, like all the way up through the stuff that even we do?
Mm,
Sure.
yeah. Oh
There
yeah.
sure, for sure will.
Yeah.
Will it ever replace the experience? I don't think so. Like, I just don't, because again, the problems that I'm talking to folks about, it's
Mm,
not a lack of knowledge,
mm,
right? Like it's not a lack of general knowledge.
mm.
You can find out how to do all of the things I actually do for people.
Yeah.
You can find that anywhere,
Yeah.
okay?
Right. That's right.
It's
Yes.
the practical application and the dealing with people
Mm,
that's the magic
yeah.
because it's that experience. It's 20, almost like I don't want to say, but it's over 25 years of, of doing this stuff,
Right.
right? Like the to replicate like that, I'm not saying it's impossible. I just don't see it in my lifetime. Not saying never, but I certainly don't see it in my lifetime. And the fact is like AI's been around since the 50s, right?
Yeah.
People don't give that credit, but
What?
it has.
Yeah.
So
No, there's two things there. One is I was talking to someone yesterday about AI, and he's in the space in a kind of a different field, if you will. But I was telling him my thesis is that until my youngest kid will be 6 here in a few weeks, and so until maybe her generation, but until generations come up only learning on ChatGPT or whatever the platform,
yeah,
Gemini or Cloud, whatever it is, until they were used to that learning method, it's never going to be something that people will mass adopt in the sense of, because to your point, you can get on ChatGPT or YouTube or wherever and figure out all this stuff pretty simple. That's a pretty. It's
Yeah.
simple, not easy. You
Yeah.
can figure
Yep.
all this stuff, like how to get into it. It's not like it's hidden like it was in 1970 where you didn't have access to this stuff. Okay?
Yes.
But people don't like to learn that way. They haven't been trained to learn that way. That's not their thing. We kind of enjoy that, so we've got it. That's our advantage. But I don't want to run a manufacturing company, so that's my disadvantage, right? So,
Yep.
so we're a long way off from that. But will it replace people in certain jobs? Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think this pushback on it can't do. I was in China in 2019, and so I've got kind of three levels of AI stuff. I'm curious what your take on is. I was in China in 2019, and they showed us some videos. And it's China, so they make stuff up. So I'm not trying to act like I buy it all, but they showed us videos of 18 wheelers, fully automated, driving through the country, on these roads that are windy and stuff, pulling trailers and stuff. Like, okay, so that was AI.
Yeah.
So my three levels of AI is kind of, there's a lot more levels than this, but the three basic levels I take it is there's these high end users. So that's the governments, that's maybe Boeing or Raytheon or whoever, China. There's these Sam Altman, these very top tier who know things about it that we'll never even crack into, right? Then there's kind of so that's level one, and then there's all these little sub tiers, and then there's tier two, which is kind of people like us who are using it and we're involved with it. We use it for what we need to do, and then there's tier three, and tier three is people who they may have heard about it, they might use it, they don't realize, like to your point, like it's been around for a while, they're not using it, and so those are kind of the three buckets, and those three buckets they're going to be here for a long, long time. There will
Yeah.
be more tools that people don't realize. You will have someone saying, "I don't use AI," while something on their phone is literally AI, a GPT wrapper. They don't even know.
Yep. Yep.
But that's kind of the tiers I think about it. So I think the fear is probably a lot of it overstated, because you're going to have that stuff. What you're going to see is more iterations where people go, "Okay, I got this app. It's absolutely cool," and the app's just AI. They don't know it. That's kind of my thoughts on the three tiers. What do you think about that?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, it's like anything. Like, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn outside of my time on X and Twitter.
You got teachers.
And
I can't
yeah,
crack
like,
LinkedIn.
like the whole thing is, right? Like you can get headline after headline of, this company deploying this,
Yeah.
specific tool. And again, to your point, like that highest tier of, government and, big Fortune 50, Fortune 100
Right.
business, they are for sure trying to figure this stuff out, because the reality is that they have the data pools that
Yes.
allow them to aggregate this stuff. And that is really what, the kind of AI ML world is built around. And like, I mean, I could go down a whole rabbit hole of this stuff that, I've learned and seen and have
Yeah.
been modeled. It would blow your mind, because it blew my mind.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And but all the way through, right? Like I think about, my wife was a school teacher, an elementary school teacher for her career. And I think about, the disruption to kind of traditional learning that has happened and will happen to my, like to your point, right? Our daughters, our kids are the same age, right? So it's like, what will happen in her generation from a learning perspective in traditional education. And I think, like before we even get anywhere, that's a conversation that ultimately ends up changing, because
Oh yeah.
the access to knowledge is different. Like when I was a kid, I still remember, not having the internet. I still remember,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel old just saying that, right? But it's like,
Right.
we did, back when I was a kid, right? And it's like we
Yeah.
had encyclopedias, we looked stuff up. Like we
Yeah.
didn't have that access. And it's like to go from, that to internet to now, like, it's like it's kind of that genesis of like computing power, right? Like it used to be the size of a garage. Now it's, literally in the palm
Yep.
of my hand, right?
Mhm.
It's that same thing. So it will flow down. I totally agree. It will flow down. And you'll still always have the folks that are, the how do I program my VCR folks, right? It's like, I don't know. Like I got a kid that tells me how to do this, and
Yeah.
like I don't even know, right?
Oh yeah. I call my kids in. My oldest is 17, so I'll something be going on.
Yeah.
Like, how do I, what's going on with this? 'Cause the TV's messed up, or the PlayStation or whatever he's working on. Like I need help here. I don't know how to do it, because that's for him. That's just common knowledge. For me, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to enter into this world of how do I get this Kindle Fire TV to start connecting with my iPhone and stuff. And so
Right.
it's like that's foreign to me. And so the complexity actually, to your point a minute ago, the complexity actually means that there's going to be a lot more opportunity, um, and so yeah, and so the complexity means that yeah, there's going to be more opportunity because
Oh
the
yeah.
more complex it gets, there will be jobs that are gone, but there's going to be more jobs in different areas because people are just we're just people, and because we're people, nothing we make is perfect. That
Yeah.
kind of gets lost. Like
Well,
nothing we make is perfect.
yeah, I think like a different way to say it too is right. Like, will it come for our work will change,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like it always has.
mm,
Like that's the thing. I, I don't know. I just maybe I'm kind of too much of a realist or something. But like the things that I've seen, sure, they're super interesting, and I do think that it will drive change for everybody's kind
mm,
of work
mm,
life and what
mm,
they understand as like
mm.
where they fit in that cog in the wheel.
Yep.
But yeah, I kind of like to say it that way because the people I think that are trying to say, um, oh, it's going to come for you are, the same folks that are saying like, just because you're starting, out in a career, like you don't need to make X amount of money because
Yeah.
it's that whole dynamic
Mm,
of, kind of, in some sense propaganda, right?
yeah.
Like it's too politicized for
It,
me.
yeah.
Too polarizing. Maybe politicized is the wrong word, but it's too, I think it's like clickbait, man. You're trying to get a reaction out of people. That's not reality. It's not what I see every day,
Mm.
show up in conversations. So it's like,
Yeah, and then the few things I'll say to that is one, I'll see people say, well, blue collar jobs aren't going anywhere. Now, I would agree that plumbers are going to be the last to go, or something like that, because there's not a huge Amazon in the plumbing space. But if there was, you better watch out because Amazon is going to try to figure this out pretty quickly.
oh yeah,
So I'm not saying quit your job or bail out or any of that stuff. I'm saying I wouldn't be, oh, it's never coming. But but at some point, if there's an Amazon in the plumbing space, I'm not in the plumbing space. I don't know, but if there is, they're going to try to figure this out. And so don't be naive to that because what I do see a lot of people say is AI content, AI writing is terrible. And this is guys, y'all don't know how to use it. Like it can clone your voice pretty much
yeah,
instantaneously if you give it enough content. Like, and I mean, most of my stuff I put on Twitter is AI content. I've just trained it on my voice, and I
yep,
just it says, hey, say this about this, and or I'll type something, and it works. Like my content has gotten better because of that, and so it helps me with that. And so people saying, oh, I can't do this. No, I mean, I did a thing this weekend for the newsletter where I took Cody Schneider, who I don't know. I just downloaded his transcripts from his YouTube, took some of his tweets, didn't touch his newsletter because I don't know if he actually writes it or not, and had ChatGPT create a new company, and then Claude write a newsletter for it and chat and tweets about it in his voice. It looks just like him. Now he might want to quibble some stuff, which I get. There's some editing, but
yeah,
for never meeting the person, it was pretty
yeah,
simple to do. Simple, not easy. You got to know how to do that stuff. So
yep,
anyways, so I'm with you. Like, okay, how that's that. So the first year, people will look at me doing that, going, "Oh my gosh." That's Padawan learner stuff there, big dog. That's
yeah,
Padawan learner stuff. And I'm like, yeah, well, okay. But I also realize that I don't know what the tier one's doing, but they're doing stuff that would blow my mind, to your point.
oh,
But
it's yeah,
but the people who say it can't do stuff are kind of that tier three. It's like, I'm not being derogatory. Like they're not there yet. And so I think
yeah.
it's that balance of it's not going to be here tomorrow. How fast it'll be here, who knows? But just don't ignore it like it's not going to come. So where can people connect with you? Thanks for coming on again. It was good to connect again. Where can people
Yeah,
find
man.
you if they got questions? Where should they reach out?
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. It's been great. So maybe episode 2 at some point down the road.
After you do that
Lots of stuff
conference, you're
to
coming back
unpack.
on. Okay. After you do that conference, I want you back on. I want to hear about it.
So yeah, where can people find me? I'm on X or Twitter, whatever your flavor is there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can always find me on our website as well, which is just thechrysler.club. And yeah, love to connect, love having conversations. So
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful. And listen, would love to hear about the conference. So yeah, that May you said?
yeah, it's in early May, like second week in May.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah, maybe I'll capture some good video and photos. You can share some of that stuff, but
that's
it's
great.
some of the coolest stuff you'll see. So
That's awesome. Yep. All right. We'll talk soon, buddy.
cool, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
See ya.